Hi, my name is Anthony Turner, Director of the Small Business Institute. Today, my guest in the studio is John Kazanis. John's got a background in the corporate arena where he's worked in the banks and some rarefied atmospheres in that space. But not only that, he's also seen some rarefied atmospheres because he is one of the summiteers of Everest. John Kazanis, welcome to the interviews today.
Thanks, Tony. Good to be here.
Just give us a little bit of an idea about your background, because I think a lot of people would be very interested to understand how you've developed your career out of the corporate arena, certainly doing the mountaineering and everything else as well, but then now you're actually helping people understand and reach their own Everest, whatever that may be for them. So maybe a bit of your background to start with.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. So in fact, I started my career in a small business, very much like a lot of your target market and the people that you guys work with.
Yes.
A business that my mother ran for more than 30 years in the printing and copying and publishing industry.
Okay.
So as a young teenager, there was an Everest right there.
Okay.
Let me tell you. And I ran one of the stores at the age of 18, and then obviously worked through university. And my first job out of uni, I worked for Canon.
Yep.
In sales and marketing, and then I've spent 20 years in the corporate sector.
Okay.
So the last number of roles, I was a sales product and pricing director at Goodyear Dunlop.
Okay.
Prior to that, as a general manager of innovation and product at Spotless, and before that as a head of marketing director at Ad Valida.
Yep.
During that time as well, we all have passions outside of work.
Yes.
And I'm also a mountain climber and a rock climber and a mountaineer. So.
Okay.
There was a 10-year journey there which climaxed in 2010, so 5 years ago, when I was successful in summiting the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. So that obviously was a journey in its own right, but there's a lot of similarities between that and the corporate sector. So
and business in general, I would suggest, because it's you don't just all of a sudden one day go and climb Mount Everest. There's a lot of planning, there's a lot of preparation in doing things like that, as there should be in business, but unfortunately a lot of people forget that planning and preparation bit when they go into business. So maybe John, you can give us sort of a bit of an idea of that development journey of how you actually, once you'd made that decision of actually climbing to Everest, or climbing Everest, what you went through, how that went through.
So it's a very good question, Tony. So the website that I've built is called Reach Your Everest.
Yep.
So now if you're a mountaineer and if you're a rock climber, the ultimate goal is really to climb the highest mountain in the world.
Yes.
But Everest is whatever you want it to be.
Yes.
There's an Everest that lives inside of us.
Yes.
And if you're running a small business, it may well be to simply take your business from point A to point B.
Yep.
It may well be to be a market leader.
Yep.
It may well be to be successful.
Yes.
It's whatever you want it to be. And the key word here is journey.
Yes.
So you're obviously going to go on a journey. So the question is, what does that journey look like?
Okay.
What can it potentially look like? There's going to be lots of crossroads. So the first thing that I found was to have a really high level goal.
Yep.
So goal setting, in my mind, having a clear goal. So you're in charge of a ship. So you need to have a destination, otherwise you're going to be, sailing a course that's going to zigzag. But having a course and having a destination is the first key. So in my mind, I made up the goal of climbing the highest mountain in the world.
Okay.
And once I had actually set that goal, a lot of things actually happen. Then you start to think, all right, well, I've got to benchmark the success of others. I've got to build very high levels of personal resilience.
Okay.
I have to train my body and my mind to be able to reach the highest mountain in the world. So then I'm going to look at what will create success, right, to be able to achieve that. And that applies the same in business. If I want to be a market leader in a certain category or in a certain industry, the question becomes those who are already market leaders, well, what's actually creating their success? So you can benchmark them. And then what you might say is, well, you know what, I'm actually going to pick some of the bits that work for them and some of the bits that work for me, and I might actually do it a little bit better.
Yeah.
I might try and be a little bit more successful or more efficient at doing that, or I might get to that destination a little bit faster.
Sure.
So I have actually found that the same principles apply in business, especially in these economic times. Personal resilience is a huge issue. So we know in business we're having to work far longer hours.
Yes.
We've got technology changes, we've got the internet, we've got commoditisation of markets, we've got free trade agreements with various countries such as China that will come into play. So it's a lot tougher.
Yes.
So if you're a small business or a large business for that matter, the ability to have organisational resilience and to have people with high levels of personal resilience is a crucial thing in order to reach your own Everest.
Yeah. So did you find the actual, I mean, and let's stay with the Everest thing at the moment, because I mean, not many people will have had the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody who's been to the top of the world, literally speaking. And I guess with the Everest thing, I would imagine, you know, there was a lot of things that you had to do, and in that process and in that journey of, you know, of getting the fitness levels to even climb Everest, but then B, the actual journey of climbing Everest itself. You would have learned a lot about yourself in that process. Would you like to enlighten us a little bit about, you know, some of the things you learned along the way?
So the key to it was, once I set the goal, once I committed myself to, right, I'm going to have a go at this, then the question becomes, well, how will I do this? Yep. So, you know, I looked at all the training schedules of people that had been successful. Yes. And there were three kinds of people that were successful at climbing Everest. Number one, there were guides who are on Everest every year. Yes. Who are climbing Everest on a yearly basis. I didn't fall into that category. Okay. The second group of people, there are 14 8,000 metre peaks in the world. The second group of people had probably done an easier 8,000 metre peak, if there is such a thing, and then they would have a go at Everest. I had not done an easy 8,000 metre peak. The highest I'd ever been was about 6,900 metres. So then I looked at then the last group of people who had never been higher than about 7,000 metres. So the key was, right, what have they done? What journey have they been through? Mm-hmm. What training regime did they have to implement? So then I came up with an 18-month training program for myself. Yes. To be able to be strong enough, fit enough, mentally and physically to be able to climb Everest. So that involved, you know, we're talking doing, you know, 180k bike rides on Saturday mornings, cycling up and down the Dandenongs, up to 7 or 8 times in a day, hauling 30 kilogram packs up, you know, the sides of mountains, weight training, even doing some meditation, visualization, creating self-belief. So that essentially was the journey, and it basically started with, you know, 3-hour training sessions, 6-hour training sessions, and then the last 3 to 6 months, 12-hour training sessions. And it included a pre-acclimatisation trip in Nepal to pre-acclimatise my body to about 5,500 metres. So then when I joined the expedition, I was as ready as I could be. And really after doing that, that's when I actually then got to Nepal, and then we drove into Tibet. Yes. And then I spent basically 2 months on the mountain itself. Okay. As part of an expedition of, you know, 19 people, and out of those 19 people, 10 people summited, and 1 person unfortunately died. Okay. So, you know, that's something that, you know, probably any kind of training doesn't really prepare you for. Yes. And that's pretty much in line with the stats, the current stats in terms of, you know, when you join an expedition, what are your chances? You know, it's probably a 50% chance that you may well actually summit, and then there's probably a 5% chance that out of those people that sort of summit, you know, that someone may well not make it back, unfortunately. Sure. Yeah. So what were some of the highlight moments, and maybe even the low light moments of actually doing that summiting? Look, even if you just put a tent in your backyard and you're forced to live in it for 2 months, it's a hard slog. Okay. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Especially when, you know, at night it's minus 10 degrees. Right? So, you know, you do get tired of it. It is a lot of hard work, because remembering that what you actually have to do is you actually have to climb Everest probably several times. So you're going up to the high camps and you're coming back down. You're going up to the next high camp, and then you're coming back down. So you've probably climbed Everest 2 or 3 times before you actually summit. Okay. And the year that I summited, really there was only about 5 days when the weather was good enough for people to summit. Okay. So generally, people will summit for only about a week of the whole sort of year. So you have to, there's an element of luck here with the weather itself. It does happen where people try and summit and the weather's bad and then they have to come back down, but then they're too tired to have another go. Yeah. So the low light is that it's a bit of a grind. After spending 12 to 18 months training and then you're living in a tent for 7 weeks, and then you get your summit chance. Obviously the highlight was summiting. Yes. It wasn't a great day when I summited. We're talking 50, 60 kilometre an hour winds. So summited, on the summit for about 10 minutes. Yes. And then it was get back down to safety. Yes. Because above 8,000 metres, it is called the death zone. So unfortunately, you can quite easily die up there. There's lots of dead bodies. I saw 3 corpses from previous people that had been on the mountain, unsuccessful. So that's a bit confronting. And probably then the highlight after that is really coming home and actually eating proper food and sleeping in a proper bed. It makes it all worthwhile.
Yes, there's an old story that I remember reading or seeing or hearing. I can't remember now, but it was along the thing. Somebody was climbing up this mountain and he saw this old man coming down and was carrying this bag of rocks, and the young bloke said, "Well, what have you been up to the top?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "What's enlightenment?" And the old man put the bag of rocks down, and he sort of stood up and he said, "It's wonderful." And he said, "What comes after enlightenment?" And he picked up the rocks again and started walking back down the mountain. And I think it's achievements like that, of getting on top of Everest, whatever your Everest is, but physically being on top of Everest are things where those are highlight moments, but they too pass. And there is a lot that you can learn out of it. Something you touched on before, John, was interesting, was that it was the mental acclimatisation, and I think possibly I'd like to explore that a little bit more, because oftentimes I see in business, the work that I've done, is many people have an idea and they do a lot of the work and everything else, but they don't always have that mental acclimatisation to actually see it through. There's some special techniques or things that you've used to actually help yourself and now people that you work with create that mental acclimatisation?
The mental part is a crucial part.
Yeah.
So I think when you're aiming for your own Everest, and particularly if it involves a physical challenge such as climbing a big mountain, having that sync between mental success and mental conditioning and physical conditioning. So to give you an idea, on the expedition, we had people that were actually strong enough physically, but mentally they just lost it.
Yeah.
And they just basically said, right, I just cannot do this. So self-belief.
Yes.
Conversely, we had people that were mentally strong enough, but physically they were not strong enough to be able to summit. Now, it's a proven scientific fact that the human mind cannot differentiate between something that's actually real and something that's imagined.
Okay.
So, in my book, and we spoke about this book before the interview, Tony. So this is just a book called Reaching for Everest, an inspirational book on climbing Mount Everest and pushing boundaries in life. So it's 50% personal development, 50% about climbing Mount Everest. So a lot of your members and the people viewing this video would be interested in this. It's available from reachoreverest.com, so you can buy it online. So one of the things that I talk about is visualization and mental rehearsals. So just watch any professional athlete, watch a swimmer before they jump into the pool for a race. They are simulating in their mind exactly what will happen. They are simulating every single stroke, how they're going to touch the end of the pool. Watch any racing car driver in the cockpit of their car. They have already rehearsed every single turn and every single gear change. So then when it happens for real, it happens a lot more efficiently.
Sure.
Right? I actually did a lot of mental simulation work in my own mind, having not been on Everest itself. Some people call it meditation or visualization, but it was training for success. So I'd be carrying 30 litres of water, so 30 kilograms on a very steep hill. So I'd be doing that for up to say 5 or 6 hours.
Yes.
And I'd be actually imagining that I was actually on Everest itself.
Okay.
Right? Or when I'm cycling up the side of the Dandenong, so I'm, a lot of pain and suffering, I'd be imagining that I'm in a storm on Everest and I'm slowly, step by step, climbing up. And the actual fact is, the simulation training that I did was actually in some ways a lot harder than the actual real thing. Okay. So you can actually over-simulate, and that's actually a really good thing. Pilots do this very, very well. They actually build simulators. Yes. They simulate all the scenarios. So then when it does happen, it all happens automatically, and they are programmed to respond in a certain way. So simulation training. Now, organisations do a similar thing. They do simulation strategies. They do a lot of crisis. So in crisis management, for example, you simulate. If you're running a big plant, you might simulate that the plant has blown up. So what do you actually do? Right? So you simulate all those scenarios. Yes. From a health and safety point of view, a lot of businesses will do that, having evacuations and so forth. So a lot of similarities between what you can do at a personal level, whether it's in sports, whether it's in reaching your own Everest, and in business.
Sure. And emergency services is another area, isn't it, where they actually train and retrain and retrain. And I had the privilege of doing a lot of work in the aftermath of the Black Saturday bushfires and the Victorian floods with traumatised people. And one of the things we found there is that the people who had actually been through some of these preparation techniques fared better in the recovery process than those that had not, because when the emergency actually hit, their mind was already semi-trained into this is what I do, and in a trauma situation, from the studies that we did around it, is that the mind flicks out of sort of a sequence into a responsive sort of phase, and as a result of that, then people go with what they're trained. The shortest neuro pathways for something to happen is the way the brain works, and hence those that are trained, they go on automatic pilot. They just do what they've been told to do.
Yeah, and creating self-belief and training your mind to succeed, it can only have benefits.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things this sort of really touches in, which I know you have an interest in from the information that I've read about you and speaking to you previously, is looking at this emotional elements of and the mind in the training that you do, because I think it's becoming more and more powerful and more important for people to understand how the mind and the attitude plays so much of a part in terms of individual success, whatever that may be, and in whatever field, and in reaching what your Everest, whatever that may be. Do you want to sort of give a bit of an idea of the that emotional intelligence side of things, and how you utilise it in what you now do?
So we know Daniel Goleman, obviously, who's created the concept of emotional intelligence. So the first two stages, self-awareness, and the second stage, self-control, and this applies at an organisational level as well. So organisations can have emotional intelligence. Are they aware, and do they have control? But before you can lead others, you've got to be able to lead yourself, proven by research in terms of successful leadership. Therefore, I guess one of the things that I found out about myself doing a lot of the training for Everest, and a lot of the training that I actually did it on my own, because it's pretty hard to find people that want to cycle 180 kilometres, every Saturday morning, every Saturday for 18 months. So I got to learn a lot about myself to really be aware of what's going on inside of me. For example, negative thoughts. So negative thoughts would, a lot of question marks. Why are you doing this? Why are you cycling 180 k's? Well, just cycle 100 kilometres today, or go home a bit early. Ain't you feeling tired yet? Everest is going to be too hard. So self-doubt. So I got to observe all of that and see, well, that's just a natural part of the process. So then I'm like, right, I'm aware now, self-awareness. Now I can manage that. These are just thoughts. It's just like watching TV. They're just thoughts. The brain's generating a lot of thoughts, a lot of question marks, as it will when you want to push boundaries. And that's probably the toughest thing. I think inherently as mammals, perhaps we are wired to be safe, to, maybe it's back to our caveman days, to stay inside the cave, don't go outside the cave. If you do anything that's a little bit risk averse or a little bit out of the ordinary, there's going to be danger. So when you're pushing boundaries and when you set a goal which involves reaching your own Everest, I think a lot of doubt will arise. But by going through this journey, I think creating self-awareness and then creating self-control, I'm going to now be able to manage that. There's going to be obstacles along the way, and whether that's just inside your own head, whether that's in the external environment, then creating some control mechanisms to overcome that. But essentially, I think once you've achieved those two stages, I think what happens is you'll achieve a high level of personal resilience. So, give you an example. So after, it's become normal for me to cycle 180 kilometres in a day. Then look, riding for 2 to 3 hours, riding 90 kilometres, which might be quite difficult for most people who don't cycle. For me, it was just a walk in the park.
Yep.
Mind you, now that my pain threshold has dropped back down again, I'd have to go through the same sort of journey.
Okay.
Right? So, personal resilience, varies based on, the pain, suffering, visualisation and goal setting that you've done at the time, and you slowly raise it.
Yes.
Using a number of the techniques that we've spoken about.
Yes.
And then, you can hopefully achieve success.
It's interesting, something you said then too, is that, if you actually drop the levels back, then you've got to rebuild back up again, and you go through the same sort of processes of challenging yourself. I remember somebody once said to me, there's nothing great has ever been found in a comfort zone,
Right.
and it is this pushing yourself. And I think as, whether it is in climbing or whether it is in, sport of any kind, but also particularly in business, because, bearing in mind a lot of our audiences are business people, it is these ongoing challenges, is these ongoing ways of self-improvement, of finding new ways to actually do better what you're doing, that it gives you, the higher levels of success. And you will be tested at every boundary that you come to. In terms of the work you now do, you're working a lot coaching and helping people develop these sorts of resilience and things. What are some of these sorts of things you take them through?
Yeah, look, the first thing is to have some clear goals, and it's surprising. I tend to work with people under the age of 30, so young professional people,
yes.
and also I've done a lot of work with startups
yes.
and small businesses. The first thing is to have some clear goals, right? So for young professional people, we go through a visualisation journey. If your life was a movie and you're the director,
Yep.
but that movie hasn't happened yet, well, what would that movie look like? What's the end game? What are some of the things that create satisfaction in your life from a financial point of view,
Yes.
a physical point of view, a relationship point of view? So it's about writing those goals down, but also visualising them. I get them to do a scrapbook with what the ideal outcomes might look. And the same applies from a business point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So a small business or a startup, we can have varying goals. So if we have a startup that says, right, I want to go global and I want to be a market leader, that's going to create a whole different set of potential behaviours than a business that says, you know what, I've just got a machine that produces things and I just want to sell these things.
Yes.
So you can see two different types of goals here.
Yes.
That will create various levels of success. So the first thing is nail the goals, have the goals set, right? And if only you achieve 80% of those goals or 70% of the goals, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But at least you have set in your mind and you've also written down and
Yes.
visualised what the goals will be. Now, big corporations do this all the time. They do strategic planning, don't they?
Absolutely.
Right? They've got a strategic planning process, and that's exactly what they do. They have the goals set in concrete financially. They sign off on those goals, and then everybody works towards those goals.
Yes.
So that's the first part. Then the second part becomes, well, how? Then it's about creating the self-awareness and the self-control, benchmarking the success of others,
Yes.
and creating an action plan, and whether it's at an individual level
Yes.
or whether it's at a small business level.
Yep.
How do we do that? What are going to be the action plans that will now get us to where we want to be? And we have strengths and weaknesses, we all do, and that could be at an organisational level or at a personal level. So it's clearly identifying what those strengths and weaknesses are,
Yes.
using those to our advantage, lifting the benchmark,
Yes.
creating the personal resilience, and then going forward with some action plans. Then it's about really good decision making. Then it's about managing conflict. It's about managing relationships, because we know that in terms of emotional intelligence, the next two stages are social awareness
Yes.
and relationship building.
Yes.
And in terms of being successful at an individual level or at a corporate level, those things are key. Once you've got control of yourself, then it's about integrating into your networks, into the business community that you're in a social setting, in a networking setting, to then create success. And that could just be simply getting customers. Getting customers means connecting with other people.
Yes.
So that's pretty much a 4 or 5 step sort of process that I tend to take people through a number of weeks.
Yep.
Starting with the goal setting element, and finishing with the action plans and the results, and then we'll go back again. We say, right, how how are we now tracking after several months? Maybe the goals were too low, maybe the goals were a little bit high, so we'll adjust those.
Yes.
But finding what lives inside of us, that Everest,
yeah.
is the crucial part in my mind.
Do you find many people have difficulty finding what that Everest is for them? In a lot of the business people that I deal with and have dealt with over the years, I've found that it's very hard for them to articulate a goal. And I sometimes wonder whether that is to do with the fact that they don't necessarily give themselves permission to actually go for something big, or whether they've just been so sanitised that they don't think big.
Look, I actually find the same thing. It's surprising how many people do not have goals, or they're not sure about their goals. So what I say to them is, look, you need to maybe allocate a weekend or just a really good day to this. Just go and sit somewhere quietly on your own with a blank sheet of paper, and do not be distracted by external influences. Don't put restrictions on the goals that you set, but be reasonably realistic.
Sure.
Think about your journey in life. When you're 90 years old, what will make you feel content?
Yes.
Right? And that's at a personal level and at a professional level. Right? It includes your health, it includes your relationships, it includes your well-being, mentally and physically, because they are all interrelated. It's all about also creating a little bit of balance in those elements. But in my mind, it's about achieving satisfaction and being content when you're 90 years old. Right? So if you start with that kind of proviso, and then the other thing that I say is set high goals. Now look, if you said to me that within 24 hours you want to be Richard Branson, I'd say to you, look, maybe you are being a little bit unrealistic here.
Yeah.
Right? But if you said, look, I want to be like a Richard Branson, but maybe within, say, 5, 10 or 20 years, we'll say, right, terrific. So you want to be an entrepreneur, let's benchmark. So then we go straight to the benchmarking. Right? What is Richard Branson, what has he done during his career? Well, yes. Stephen Covey talks about the 7 habits of highly effective people. So we benchmark the success of other people.
Yes.
So then we go into the how. So clearing our mind, setting high goals, starting with a blank sheet of paper, that exercise can work quite well. Right? And once you set that proviso up and you have a go at it, and obviously you have to then review your goals.
Yes.
I find that every 12 months is probably a good way to do that, and your goals will evolve. They might potentially change during different life stages, the different life stage of your life that you're in.
Yeah, one of the processes that I was taught, and we teach through the Small Business Institute training as well, is that when you've actually set a goal, we look at it and say, okay, think about it as a journey, and maybe you're going to go overseas somewhere. So you know where you are. You're here and where you currently reside. You're looking to go somewhere. We've got a destination. And one of the things we suggest is that you then create some other pictures, and that is, what does halfway, a quarter way, three-quarter way look like? So as you can then start taking action points to get from where you are now to the next level. Then you review, then you can adjust the goal or whatever. So a similar sort of thing, just a different way of processing it. And we found that a lot of the people who have been through our trainings find that's a very great way of actually simplifying what can be overwhelmed. Because one of the things that I've heard of and we talk about is that there's a thing called mind snap, and that is that where the goal is so big that we cannot conceive of how we would do it from where we are now, because of we don't have the experience, we don't have the resources, whatever it may be, and therefore we tend to shut it down before we even get it going. Or the other thing is our family members shut it down for us.
Sure.
They tap into our lack of confidences or whatever the challenges may be. But that in itself is just part of that process, isn't it, of actually overcoming those obstacles that are either put in front of us or that we put in front of us. And
the fact is, there's going to be lots of obstacles. So so there's two things there. So one of the things that I tend to tell people to do is to do a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month, 3-year, 5-year, 20-year plan. Yes. Pretty much like what corporates will do. I mean, corporates now, in fact, are talking about 90-day plans. Yes. As you're aware, it's all about the 90-day plan. A new CEO will come in, show me your 90-day plan. Yeah. So we can do that at an individual level. The other thing is, when you're creating change and you're setting high goals, you are going to get a lot of no's.
Yes.
Right? So if we think about Colonel Saunders from KFC fame, how many no's did he get? He got, I think, more than 1,000 no's before his recipe was accepted. Okay. Right? So, think about the personal resilience, that a person like that had to build.
Yes.
So whatever goals we have, whatever Everest we have, I think we just need to accept that we're going to get a lot of no's. And once you accept that,
yep.
you're going to get a lot of obstacles. And people will say, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. Fine, I accept that that's what will happen. Now I'm going to get on with it.
Yep.
Right? And you move forward. And you're right, Tony. Having some steps, intermediary steps, that you can then achieve and you can measure your success with, that's a sure way to then reach your Everest. And look, it might take you 20 years. It doesn't matter.
It cements that you've got a place you can see how far you've come. So it gives you that momentum, I think, to help keep you on the journey when things do get tough. I think the other thing to remember too is that you were talking about the Bransons and other successful people in the world and everything. For a lot of our viewers and listeners, it's really important to remember that all of those started like our viewers and listeners did with an idea. They weren't automatically successful. It was a journey. It took time. They had these aspirations. They actually put the plans and they took the action, and that's what made them successful. It's not just, I think I'll be a Richard Branson and very wealthy today, or I'll be Sir Edmund Hillary and be on top of Mount Everest, or John Kazanis and be on top of Mount Everest. It's a case of there's a whole lot of work that has to go into it, and you have to really think about that and commit to it.
That's right, and look, persistence pays off, and it may well feel like you are knocking your head against a brick wall, but one day that brick wall will develop cracks in it,
yep.
and it will come crashing down if you keep at it. And I'm sure for every Richard Branson, there's probably thousands of others, who have also sort of failed. So the key to it is persistence.
Yep.
Keep at it.
Yep.
We all have an Everest within us. It's about setting those goals, visualising the outcomes, seeking others that can help us along in that journey, and things will happen. Things
yep.
will move forward.
And I find, John, and possibly the same, it's always amazing to me that when you actually are committed on a path and you don't know how you're going to get there, but you create some plans and ideas, it's amazing how the resources and the connections and the people just seem to turn up. Have you found that the same with you?
Well, look, the universe will manifest something.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happens,
yeah.
right? I just think the fact is, if you are persistent and resilient and you stick to your goals,
yes.
Things will move forward. They're not going to go backwards.
Yep. Definitely.
And whether it's people coming into your network, whether it's you acquiring knowledge that's going to help you along in your journey, whether it's information, whether it's technology arrives that assists you, or
yes.
or people, such as a great mentor
yep.
that can assist you. Terrific. But it's a way forward.
Yeah.
So I totally agree.
Definitely. All right. I've been talking with John Kazanis from Reach Your Everest. If you'd like some more information about John, and I will get a copy of his book, I would suggest go to reachyoureverest.com, take a look at what he does, have a look for the book, and have a good read. John Kazanis, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Tony.